Everything seemed normal on that routine flight, but it only took a fleeting glance, a gentle caress on a sleeping baby's forehead, for two destinies marked by loss to begin intertwining, without either of them knowing what was about to awaken. Her hands trembled as the plane landed in Tahoe, Miami. Sarah wasn't sure if it was from exhaustion or the fear of starting over with a 6-month-old baby and a heart shattered into a million pieces. The silence of the airport wrapped around her like a cold blanket, and for a moment she closed her eyes, wishing someone, somewhere, could see beyond her pain. She didn't know that a few seats away, a man who had forgotten how to feel was watching her caress her sleeping son's forehead, and that something in his chest, something he believed dead forever, was beginning to beat again. Sarah's tears fell onto little David's face as she rocked him in her arms. The empty apartment in Fee, Miami Beach echoed her sobs, reminding her that she was now completely alone. 3 months had passed since she lost her husband in that accident that changed her life forever, and unpaid bills piled up on the table like a mountain of despair. "I can't do this anymore, my love," she whispered to her 6-month-old baby, stroking his rosy cheeks. "Your daddy left us with nothing, and I don't know how to go on." Her green eyes, swollen from crying, looked out the window at the palm-lined streets of the historic district. At 24, Sarah Miller felt she had lived more pain than anyone deserved. The daughter of a humble family from Orlando, she had arrived in Miami, full of dreams with Robert, her first and only love. But life had other plans. The doorbell startled her. Opening the door, she found the stern face of her landlord, Mr. Thompson, an older man who looked at her with a mix of pity and determination. "Sarah, you know why I'm here," he said, adjusting his glasses. "That's 3 months of overdue rent. I can't keep waiting." "Please, Mr. Thompson," Sarah held David tightly. "I just need 1 more week. I got a job at a bookstore downtown. I start tomorrow. I promise I'll pay you everything." The man shook his head, his expression hardening. "I'm sorry, dear. I've given you too many chances. You have until Friday to vacate, or I'll have to call the authorities." When the door closed, Sarah slid down the wall to the floor, hugging David to her chest. Her hands trembled as she dialed her mother's number in Orlando. "Mom," her voice broke, "I think I'll have to come home. I can't do this anymore." Mary Ann's warm voice on the other end of the phone comforted her. "My daughter, come whenever you want. This will always be your home. But think carefully. Is that what Robert would have wanted for you too?" Sarah closed her eyes, remembering her husband's last words in the hospital. "Promise me you'll fight for our son. Promise me you won't give up." That night, as she packed her few belongings, she found a letter Robert had written to her shortly before he died. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the yellowed paper. "My beautiful Sarah, if you're reading this, it's because I'm no longer with you. I know you'll be the strongest and bravest mother David could ever have. Don't be afraid to trust again, to love again. Your heart is so big, it deserves to be filled with happiness once more. Take care of our baby, but don't forget to take care of yourself too. I love you forever, Robert." Tears blurred her vision, but for the first time in months, they weren't just tears of pain. There was something else, a spark of determination she thought was lost forever. The next day, Sarah arrived early at the Book Nook, the small bookstore located on a corner of Miami's South Beach historic district. The owner, Mrs. Peterson, a 60-year-old woman with silver hair and a maternal smile, welcomed her with open arms. "Welcome, dear," Mrs. Peterson said, naturally taking David into her arms. "This little prince can stay here while you work. Babies bring good luck to businesses." For the first time in a long time, Sarah smiled genuinely. The scent of new books and freshly brewed coffee enveloped her like a hug. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a new life here. That afternoon, while arranging books on the shelves, she overheard 2 customers' conversation. "Did you hear that Mr. Harris is coming tomorrow for the book signing about modern architecture?" said an elegant woman. The millionaire CEO who never gives interviews? Responded her companion curiously. The one and only. They say he's incredibly handsome, but colder than an iceberg. He's never been known to have a girlfriend or wife. Sarah didn't pay much attention to the conversation. Millionaires and their glamorous lives seemed as distant as the stars. She had more real problems, finding a new apartment, paying off debts, and raising her son alone. But fate, that invisible thread that weaves lives without, our knowing, had already begun to intertwine her story with that of the mysterious man the customers were talking about. That night, lying on the small sofa bed in the back room that Mrs. Peterson had temporarily lent her, Sarah watched David sleep in his makeshift bassinet. His tiny hands moved softly, as if he were caressing dreams. "We're going to be okay, my love," she whispered. "I don't know how, but we're going to get through this. Your mum isn't going to give up." Through the window, the lights of Miami sparkled like promises in the darkness. Sarah didn't know that the next day her life would change forever when a pair of blue eyes looked at her for the first time, seeing in her something no one else had managed to see, her true worth. The night breeze swayed the curtains, and with it came the scent of bougainvillea from the patio. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling for the first time in months that perhaps tomorrow could be different. The pain was still there, like a scar on her soul, but it was no longer the only thing that defined her. Somewhere in New York City, Richard Harris worked late in his office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows showing the vastness of the metropolis. Unbeknownst to him, he too was about to discover that love can arrive when you least expect it, and that sometimes the most wounded people are the ones who best know how to heal others' hearts. But if you think you've seen it all, wait for the next part. Do you like this story? Give it a thumbs up, comment from which city you're watching us, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Richard Harris closed his laptop and massaged his temples. It was 11 at night, and he had been working 14 hours straight. At 36, he had built a technology and hospitality empire spanning all of North America, but success came with a price: absolute solitude. His assistant Olivia knocked on his glass office door. "Mr. Harris, your flight to Miami leaves tomorrow at 10. Do you need me to confirm your hotel reservation?" Richard shook his head, his blue eyes reflecting accumulated fatigue. "No, Olivia. I'll only stay one night. It's just for the book presentation, and then I'm back." "Are you sure? The event might extend and—" "I'm sure," he interrupted gently. "Thank you for everything. Go get some rest." When he was alone, Richard walked to the window overlooking New York City. The lights of the metropolis stretched to the horizon, but he felt disconnected from all that bustling world below. Since the death of Emily, his fiancée, 5 years ago, he had built walls around his heart that seemed unbreakable. Emily had died in a car accident on her way to the hospital where she worked as a pediatrician. They had wedding plans, shared dreams, a whole life ahead of them. Her death not only took away his love, but also his faith that good things could last. The next day, Richard boarded his morning flight to Miami. He wore a perfectly tailored dark grey suit, his black hair combed back, and an expression that kept anyone who tried to approach him at a distance. He travelled first class, as always, with his iPad open, reviewing financial reports. Meanwhile, at the Book Nook, Sarah nervously prepared the bookstore for the afternoon event. David rested in his bassinet among the shelves, curiously observing the paper mobiles Mrs. Peterson had hung for him. "Are you sure you don't need help with the presentation?" Sarah asked, adjusting the chairs for the 5th time. Mrs. Peterson smiled as she prepared coffee and cookies. "Don't worry, dear. It's just a book presentation. About 30 people maximum will come, although—" she lowered her voice. "They say that famous businessman is coming, Richard something, I can't remember his last name." By 4 in the afternoon, the bookstore began to fill. Sarah was surprised to see the number of elegant people arriving, many in luxurious cars that contrasted with the simplicity of the neighborhood. She felt self-conscious in her simple navy blue dress and worn shoes, but Mrs. Peterson reassured her. "You look beautiful, Sarah. Elegance isn't bought, it's carried within." When Richard entered the bookstore, the atmosphere changed. His presence was magnetic, almost intimidating. Tall, with an athletic build, with those blue eyes that seemed to read people's souls. He radiated a confidence that only years of success and power give. But there was also something else, a deep, carefully hidden sadness. Sarah was serving coffee when he approached the table. Their eyes met for the first time, and something inexplicable happened. Richard, accustomed to women immediately recognizing him and behaving artificially, met a pair of green eyes that looked at him with genuine curiosity, without pretense. "Could I get a coffee, please?" he asked, his voice deep but soft. "Of course." Sarah filled a cup, noticing her hands trembling slightly. "With sugar? Black, please." When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed briefly. Richard felt an electric jolt he hadn't experienced in years. Sarah felt a strange warmth spread up her arm. "Is this your first time in this bookstore?" she asked, trying to make conversation. "Yes, it's very cozy." Richard looked around, genuinely impressed by the warm atmosphere of the place. "Do you work here?" "I just started," Sarah smiled shyly. "It's a temporary job while I sort some things out." At that moment, David began to cry from his bassinet. Sarah quickly apologized and ran to him. Richard watched her pick up the baby, rock him with infinite tenderness, whisper sweet words to him until he calmed down. Something stirred in his chest, an emotion he had buried deep. The book presentation began, but Richard barely paid attention to the author's words. His eyes constantly drifted towards Sarah, who moved discreetly around the room, attending to guests with natural grace, carrying David when necessary. During the intermission, Richard approached her again. "Is that your son?" he asked, discreetly pointing to David. "Yes," Sarah's voice softened. "His name is David. He's 6 months old. He's beautiful." Richard was surprised by his own sincerity. "Was your husband unable to come?" Sarah's face clouded for a moment. "My husband passed away 3 months ago." Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. Understanding and pain were immediately reflected in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said, and she could perceive that he truly meant it. "I shouldn't have asked." "Don't worry." Sarah adjusted David in her arms. "Do you have children?" "No." Richard looked away. Never had the chance." Something in his tone told Sarah there was a painful story behind those words. For a moment, two wounded souls recognized each other without need for words. When the event ended and the guests began to leave, Richard stayed until the end, helping Sarah collect empty cups and arrange chairs. It was something he had never done. Physical labor, serving others, simple human gestures. "You don't need to help me," Sarah said, surprised by his kindness. "You're the guest of honor." "I want to," Richard continued, stacking chairs. "Besides, I have hands like anyone else." Sarah laughed softly, and the sound was like music to Richard's ears. It had been years since he had heard such a genuine and pure laugh. When they finished, Richard stood by the door, clearly not wanting to leave. Sarah noticed and felt a strange mixture of nervousness and curiosity. "Would you like to get coffee tomorrow?" he suddenly asked, surprising himself. "I know a quiet place that serves the best coffee in Miami." Sarah hesitated. Something inside her screamed to say yes, but her rational mind reminded her she barely knew him. "I don't know. I have to work and take care of David. You can bring him." Richard smiled for the first time that night, completely transforming his face. "He seems like a very well-behaved child." Sarah laughed again and finally nodded. "Okay. What time?" 11? I'll pick you up here." When Richard left, Sarah stood watching his figure disappear into the night. Mrs. Peterson appeared beside her with a knowing smile. "That man is interested in you," the older woman said. "Don't be silly, Mrs. Peterson. He's just being kind. Dear, I'm 60 years old, and I've seen many men fall in love. The way he looked at that man isn't just kind. He's genuinely interested." That night Sarah couldn't sleep. She wondered who this elegant man really was, who had shown such kindness to her and David. She didn't know that in a luxury hotel on the other side of the city, Richard also couldn't sleep, thinking about a pair of green eyes that for the first time in years had managed to break through his defenses. And just when she started to trust, the past returned without warning. Do you think Richard will return soon? What do you think about his connection with David? Comment your city and your predictions. At exactly 11 o'clock the next morning, Richard arrived at the bookstore driving a discreet black SUV, not the sports car he usually drove. He had consciously decided not to intimidate her. He wore dark jeans and a simple white linen shirt, a casual outfit that made him look more approachable, more human. Sarah came out with David in her arms, dressed in a denim skirt and a simple white blouse that highlighted the color of her eyes. Her light brown hair fell in natural waves over her shoulders. She wore no elaborate makeup, just a touch of lip gloss, but her natural beauty was radiant. "Good morning." Richard got out of the car to open the door for her, a gesture that surprised Sarah. "Good morning. David was very excited all morning, as if he knew we were going out," she said, settling the baby in her arms. Richard smiled genuinely. "He's a smart boy. It shows." The coffee shop Richard had chosen was Grandma's Corner, a small family establishment in the heart of Sio, Miami's Coconut Grove, historic district. The walls were decorated with old photographs of the city, and the aroma of cinnamon and freshly ground coffee filled the air. They sat at a table by the window overlooking the main square. David, fascinated by the colors and sounds of the street, remained quiet in his mother's arms. "How did you find this place?" Sarah asked, admiring the authentic decor. "I come to Miami for work sometimes. I always look for small, authentic places, away from luxury hotels and restaurants." Richard paused. "Sometimes I need to remember what real life is like." There was something melancholic in his tone that made Sarah look at him more closely. "What exactly do you do?" Richard hesitated for a moment. Normally, when women discovered his true identity, everything changed. They became calculating, interested, artificial. "I own a technology company. We develop software for the hospitality industry." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Sarah nodded, not seeming particularly impressed. "That must be interesting. I've always been fascinated by computers, but I never had the chance to study anything related." "What did you study?" "Literature." Sarah smiled with nostalgia. "I dreamed of being a writer, but life had other plans." Richard noticed the sadness that crossed her eyes. "Why don't you pursue that dream now, with a 6-month-old baby and working to survive?" Sarah laughed softly, but without bitterness. "Dreams are luxuries not everyone can afford." "Dreams aren't luxuries," Richard leaned forward. "They're necessities. Without them, we just exist. We don't live." His words resonated with Sarah in a way she didn't expect. There was something in the intensity of his gaze that told her he too had given up on important dreams. "Do you have dreams?" she asked him. Richard remained silent for a long moment, looking out the window at the ocean that stretched majestically before them. "I did," he finally replied, "but I lost them some years ago." "What happened?" "I lost someone very important to me, and with her I lost the ability to feel that life could be different." Sarah instinctively extended her free hand and gently touched his on the table. The contact was electric for both. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know what it feels like to lose the person you love." Richard turned his hand to intertwine his fingers with hers. It was the first significant physical contact he had had in years. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you keep going when you feel like your world has collapsed?" "Day by day." Sarah looked at David, who was sleeping peacefully. "Some days are harder than others. Some days I cry in the shower so he doesn't see me. But then I look at my son and realize that he needs me to be strong, that he deserves to have a mother who fights to give him a better life." "You're very brave." "I'm not brave." Sarah shook her head. "I'm just a mother who has no other option but to keep going. That's exactly what bravery is. Richard gently squeezed her hand. Keeping going when you feel like you can't anymore. They spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing. Richard told her about his travels across the country, describing beautiful places he had visited but had never been able to truly enjoy. Sarah told him about her childhood in Orlando, about family traditions, about the small pleasures she had learned to value. "Do you know what I miss most about my hometown?" Sarah said, her eyes bright with nostalgia. "Sundays at the farmer's market. My grandmother used to take me from a very young age. The smell of fresh produce, the sound of vendors hawking their goods, the taste of a blueberry muffin with iced tea. It was like time stood still." "Sounds beautiful." Richard looked at her with an intensity that made her blush. "When was the last time you went?" "For Robert's funeral." Sarah's voice broke slightly. "I haven't been able to go back since. It's too painful. Someday you'll go back." Richard spoke with strange conviction. "And when you do, it will be to create new, happy memories." David began to wake up, stretching and yawning. Sarah held him close to her chest, rocking him gently. Richard watched the scene with a mixture of tenderness and longing. Can I hold him?" he asked, surprising himself. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but something in Richard's eyes reassured her. Carefully, she handed David to him. To her surprise, the baby immediately nestled in Richard's arms, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He remembered me, I think," Richard murmured, visibly melting. "It's impossible to forget you," Sarah murmured without thinking, and then blushed as she realized what she had said. Richard looked at her intently. The moment was interrupted by Richard's phone. Olivia's name appeared on the screen, labeled urgent. He hesitated, but finally answered. "What's up, Olivia?" His assistant's voice sounded tense on the other end of the line. "Mr. Harris, you need to return to Deep-New York City. Immediately. The Japanese investors have moved their meeting up to this afternoon. If you're not here by 4 o'clock, we could lose the most important contract of the year." Richard closed his eyes, feeling reality hit him brutally. "Okay, I'll be there." He hung up and looked at Sarah with an apologetic expression. "I have to go. It's a work emergency." "Of course, don't worry." Sarah took David from his arms, but couldn't hide her disappointment. "Can I see you again? When I get back? When will you be back?" Richard realized he didn't know. His life was full of commitments, trips, meetings that stretched for weeks. "Soon" was all he could promise. Sarah nodded, but he could see in her eyes that she didn't entirely believe him. As they returned to the bookstore, both felt that something beautiful had been left unfinished. Before she got out of the car, Richard took her hand. "Sarah, what's happening between us? It's real for me. I don't know how to explain it, but ever since I met you, I feel like I've woken up from a very long dream. It's real for me, too." Sarah leaned in and gently kissed his cheek. "But reality is complicated, Richard. You have your world, and I have mine. Worlds can change," he said. "People can choose different worlds." As he watched Sarah enter the bookstore with David in her arms, Richard realized that for the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for. But he also knew that his world of corporate commitments and millionaire responsibilities wouldn't stop for anyone. On the flight back to New York City, Richard looked out the window at the receding landscapes. In his mind, he could only see green eyes and hear the soft laugh of a woman who, without knowing it, had begun to heal his broken heart. Meanwhile, at the bookstore, Sarah was telling Mrs. Peterson about her morning. "That man is falling in love with you, dear," Mrs. Peterson said. "But be careful. Men like him live in very complicated worlds." Sarah nodded, but in her heart, she knew it was already too late to be careful. She was falling in love too. What he said before he left will change the course of the whole story. "Do you think Richard will return soon? What do you think about his connection with David? Comment your city and your predictions." 2 weeks had passed since Richard left Dazenas, Miami, and each day felt like an eternity for Sarah. During the day, she kept busy at the bookstore, organizing events and attending to customers. But at night, When David slept, her mind flew to those blue eyes that had awakened feelings she thought were lost forever. Richard, for his part, had immersed himself in work like never before. The merger with the Japanese company required his attention 24 hours a day, but not even the most important meetings could remove the image of Sarah carrying David, her sincere smile, the way she had looked at him without pretense or hidden agendas. It was Thursday afternoon when the bookstore phone rang. Sarah, who was feeding David, asked Mrs. Peterson to answer. "The Book Nook, good morning," Mrs. Peterson answered with her warm voice. "Good afternoon. This is Richard Harris. May I speak with Sarah, please?" Mrs. Peterson smiled widely and gestured to Sarah, who almost choked in surprise. "Richard!" Her voice sounded more excited than she would have liked. "How are you?" "Thinking of you," he replied directly. "Every day, every hour. Sarah, I need to see you. Could you come to New York City this weekend?" Sarah felt her heart race, but reality immediately hit her. "Richard, I can't. David is too young for such a long trip, and besides, I don't have the money for—" "I'll take care of everything," he interrupted her. "I'll send a driver for you so you don't have to worry about anything. Just, please, say yes. I need to see you." The vulnerability in his voice completely disarmed her. "Okay," she whispered, "but only if you're completely sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." On Saturday morning, an elegant black SUV pulled up in front of the bookstore. The driver, an older man named Mr. Johnson, helped Sarah load her luggage and properly install David's car seat. "Are you the young lady who has my boss so smitten?" Mr. Johnson asked with a paternal smile as they drove down the highway. "Smitten?" Sarah blushed. "In 30 years working for him, I've never seen him so nervous about anything other than work. Yesterday he changed suits 4 times before deciding what to wear for today." Sarah couldn't help but smile. The idea of Richard being nervous about seeing her seemed impossible, considering the confidence he radiated. The 3-hour drive flew by. Mr. Johnson turned out to be an excellent conversationalist, telling her amusing anecdotes about his years as a driver and how he had seen Richard's company grow from its beginnings. When they arrived in Desert, New York City, Sarah was breathless. It wasn't her first time in the capital, but she had never seen the city from this perspective. Mr. Johnson drove through the most elegant areas, Manhattan, Upper East Side, until they reached a condominium complex that looked more like a modern palace. "Does Richard live here?" Sarah asked, impressed by the perfectly manicured gardens and sophisticated architecture. "In the penthouse," Mr. Johnson replied. "But don't worry, miss. Mr. Harris is a good man. It's just that, well, sometimes he forgets that not everyone lives in his world." Richard was waiting for them in the building lobby, dressed in dark jeans and a blue shirt that made his eyes stand out. When he saw Sarah get out of the Savtran with David in her arms, he felt as if time stood still. "You're here," he said, approaching with a smile that completely transformed his face. "Here we are." Sarah felt butterflies in her stomach. David was an angel the whole trip. Richard leaned down to look at the baby, who immediately extended his little arms towards him. Without hesitation, Richard picked him up, and David nestled against his chest as if he had been waiting for him all his life. "I think he remembered me," Richard said, visibly melting. "It's impossible to forget you," Sarah murmured without thinking, and then blushed as she realized what she had said. Richard looked at her intently. "Come, I want to show you something." The penthouse was impressive, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city, designer furniture, works of art that probably cost more than everything Sarah had owned in her life. But what impressed her most was a specific corner of the apartment. Richard had converted a room into a makeshift nursery. A new crib, toys, changing table, everything a baby could need. "When did you do this?" Sarah asked, moved to tears. "This week. I wanted you to feel comfortable. For David to be comfortable." Richard suddenly seemed vulnerable. "Is it okay? Is it too much?" Instead of answering, Sarah walked over to him and hugged him, with David still in her arms. Richard closed his eyes, inhaling the soft scent of her hair, feeling his cold, controlled world fill with warmth. "Thank you," she whispered, against his chest. "No one has ever done anything like this for us." They spent the afternoon on the penthouse terrace, watching David play on a blanket while they talked. Richard told her about his company, but also about his difficult childhood, raised alone by his mother after his father abandoned them when he was 8 years old. "That's why I work so much," he explained, watching the city lights begin to come on. "My mother worked herself to death to give me an education. I promised we would never go without again. And you succeeded. Financially, yes, but along the way, I lost other things. The ability to trust, to love without fear, to believe that people can stay." Sarah took his hand. "Some do stay, Richard. The ones who are worthwhile, they stay." That night, after putting David to bed in his new crib, they had dinner on the terrace under the stars. Richard had prepared dinner himself. Burgers, fries, and apple pie. "Where did you learn to cook like that?" Sarah asked, impressed. "My mother. It was the only thing we could afford to do together when I was a kid. On Sundays we'd cook, and for a few hours we'd forget our troubles." As they ate, Richard dared to ask the question that had been tormenting him. "Sarah, how do you feel when you're with me?" She looked him directly in the eyes. "I feel like I've been asleep and finally woken up. I feel that for the first time in a long time, the future could be different from the pain of the past. I feel that with you, I can be the person I was before life hardened me." Richard leaned closer to her. "I feel that with you and David, I could have the family I always wanted but never thought possible." They slowly leaned in, until their lips met in a soft, tentative kiss at first, but one that quickly deepened, loaded with all the emotion they had been holding back. It was a kiss that spoke of shared loneliness, renewed hope, of love being born from the ashes of broken lives. When they parted, both had tears in their eyes. "Richard, I'm scared," Sarah admitted. "I'm scared of falling in love with you and then you realizing I don't belong in your world. My world means nothing without you." Richard caressed her face. "Sarah, these days without seeing you have been the longest of my life. I don't want to keep living like this, like a ghost in my own existence." "But what's going to happen? Your life is here, your company. My company can operate from anywhere. Technology allows me to, but you're only in one place, and that's where I want to be." On Sunday morning, as they had breakfast on the terrace, watching David play with the rattle Richard had bought him, his phone rang. It was Olivia, with news that would change everything. "Mr. Harris, the media is asking about you. Apparently, someone photographed you leaving the building yesterday with a woman and a baby. They want to know if you have a secret family." Richard immediately tensed up. "What? Did you tell them?" "That we don't comment on your personal life, but they're insisting. Society and Glamour magazine is investigating who she is." Sarah saw the change in Richard's expression and knew immediately that something was wrong. "What's wrong?" she asked. Richard hung up the phone and looked at her with a mixture of concern and determination. "Journalists saw us together. They're going to investigate who you are." Sarah felt her world crumble. "What does that mean?" "It means they're going to dig into your life, they're going to publish photos, they're going to invent stories. It means the privacy you value so much is going to disappear." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I can't let David grow up in the middle of a media circus. He deserves a normal, peaceful life. We can face it together." Richard approached her. "We can—" "No." Sarah stood up, holding David. "I can't, Richard. I can't expose my son to that world. I'm sorry. Sarah, please don't do this. Don't let fear separate us." But she had already made her decision. With a heart broken into 1,000 pieces, but firm in her determination to protect her son, she headed towards the bedroom to pack her things. Richard stayed on the terrace, feeling the woman who had brought light back into his life slip through his fingers, and this time he didn't know if he could do anything to stop her. Can you love someone who broke your soul? The answer is one step away. A month had passed since Sarah, returned to Miami with a broken heart. Richard had tried to contact her countless times, but she had changed her phone number and asked Mrs. Peterson not to give him any information about her if he showed up at the bookstore. Nights were the hardest. Sarah would stay awake, rocking David, wondering if she had made the right decision. The baby seemed to look for Richard, turning his head towards the door every time he heard male footsteps, as if expecting those blue eyes to appear again. "You did the right thing, dear," Mrs. Peterson would tell her every time she saw her cry. "Rich men bring complications that a single mother can't handle." But in her heart, Sarah knew she had run away from love out of fear, and that gnawed at her. Richard, for his part, had fallen into a deep depression. He worked mechanically, his employees noticed his constant bad mood, and for the first time in his career, he had lost 2 important contracts due to lack of concentration. It was Friday afternoon when Olivia entered his office with a strange expression. "Mr. Harris, there's someone here who wants to see you. She says it's about Sarah Miller." Richard lifted his head sharply. "Who is it?" "Her name is Mary Ann Baker. She says she's Sarah's mother." Richard's heart pounded. He had mentally prepared himself to face Sarah's entire family if necessary to win her back. Mary Ann entered the office, a woman in her 50s, short, with Sarah's same brown hair but already streaked with grey. Her green eyes, identical to her daughter's, evaluated him with a mixture of curiosity and maternal protection. "You must be Richard," she said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Sarah's mother." "Mrs. Baker," Richard stood up respectfully. "It's an honor to meet you. How is Sarah? How is David?" "That's why I'm here." Mary Ann studied him carefully. "My daughter is devastated, young man. She cries every night thinking about you, but she's too proud and scared to admit it." "I'm devastated too." Richard sat across from her. "I love her, Mrs. Baker. I love Sarah and David as if they were my own family. That's what my daughter says. But she also says you live in a world too complicated for us." Richard sighed deeply. "Yes, my world is complicated, but I'm willing to change it completely for them. All I need is a chance." Mary Ann leaned forward. "Before I tell you why I'm here, I need to know something about you. Why did you never marry? Why did you never have children? Of your own?" The question hit Richard like a punch. He had never spoken about Emily with anyone outside his most intimate circle. "I had a fiancée 5 years ago. Her name was Emily. She was a pediatrician. She wanted a big family full of children. She died in a car accident 3 days before our wedding." Richard paused, feeling the familiar pain in his chest. "After that, I convinced myself that loving was too dangerous, that it was better to be alone than risk losing someone else, until I met your daughter. And what makes my Sarah different? She restored my faith." Richard looked her directly in the eyes. "When I see her with David, when she smiles at me, when she talks about her dreams, she makes me believe that life can be beautiful again. And when David looks at me, I feel as if Emily sent me the family we always wanted to have." Mary Ann's eyes welled up. "My daughter also lost a lot, young Richard. Robert wasn't just her husband. He was her best friend since adolescence. When he died, Sarah died a little too, until she met you. So why are you here? What can I do?" Mary Ann sighed deeply. "I'm here because there's something Sarah hasn't told you, something she doesn't even fully know." Richard tensed. "What?" "When Robert died, he left huge debts. Gambling debts, loans Sarah didn't even know existed. Creditors have been pressuring her, threatening her. She doesn't tell me everything, but I know she's desperate." "How much does she owe?" "About $55,000. To you, it might be little money, but for us, it's impossible." Richard felt a mixture of anger and pain. Sarah had been suffering alone, carrying problems that weren't hers, and he hadn't been able to help her. Why didn't she tell me? Because she's proud, like her father, and because she's afraid you'll think she approached you out of self-interest. That would never have occurred to me." "I know," Mary Ann smiled for the first time. "That's why I'm here. Because I see in your eyes the same thing I saw in Robert's eyes when he met Sarah. True love." Richard stood up and walked to the window. What do you need me to do? I need you to go find her, but not as the rich man who can solve all problems with money. Go as the man who loves her, who is willing to fight for her and for David. Show her that your love is stronger than any obstacle. And the debts? That's my gift to you. I'll take care of that discreetly, but you have to win her heart back. Richard turned to her with renewed determination. Where is she now? In Charleston, South Carolina. She left 3 days ago. She said she needed time to think, but I know she went to say goodbye to Robert's memories before making a definitive decision about you two. A definitive decision? Marianne nodded gravely. There's a man in Charleston, Mark, who has been in love with Sarah since high school. He's a teacher, a good man, stable. He proposed to her last week, promising her a quiet and secure life for her and David. Richard felt as if the ground opened beneath his feet. And what did she say? That she would think about it during this trip. Richard, my daughter is considering marrying him because she thinks it's the sensible thing to do, the safest for David. But I see in her eyes that her heart is with you. Then I have to go to Charleston. Yes, but not as the millionaire CEO. Go as Richard, the man who fell in love with a single mother and her baby. Go show her that true love is worth more than security. Richard was already dialing his assistant's number. Olivia, I need the private jet ready in an hour. I'm going to Charleston. Anything urgent, sir? Yes. Richard looked at Marianne, who smiled conspiratorially. I'm going to get my family back. That night, as the plane flew over the mountains towards Charleston, Richard looked out the window, thinking about everything Marianne had revealed. Sarah had been suffering alone, carrying problems that weren't hers, protecting him from a reality he would have wanted to share. But more than that, he now understood why she had run away. It wasn't just because of the media or social differences. It was because she was used to losing the people she loved, and she was terrified of going through that pain again. His phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Richard, it's Sarah. I know my mom went to see you. Please don't come looking for me. I've made a decision. I'm going to marry Mark. It's best for David and me. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. Sincerely, S. Richard read the message 3 times, feeling his heart break, but then he remembered Marianne's words. I see in her eyes that her heart is with you. He replied immediately. Sarah, if you truly don't love me, if you truly believe you'll be happy with him, I won't come. But if there's a part of you, however small, that believes we could be happy together, give me a chance to prove it to you. I arrive in Charleston in 2 hours. I'll be waiting for you in the central square until you decide to talk to me. I love you. Ah. He sent the message and put away his phone. The next 2 hours would be the longest of his life, but he was willing to wait as long as it took for the woman who had brought light back into his existence. In Charleston. Sarah read the message with tears streaming down her cheeks. She was sitting on her grandmother's patio, with David sleeping in her arms, while Mark waited in the living room for her final answer. Her heart screamed for her to run to Richard, but her mind reminded her of all the reasons why their love was impossible. The hardest decision of her life was about to be made, and the consequences would determine not only her future, but David's as well. The secret will finally be revealed, and nothing will ever be the same. What decision will Sarah make? Will Richard arrive in time? What do you think about the secret Marianne revealed? Comment from your city. The central square of Charleston glowed under the nightlights when Richard arrived. It was 11 o'clock at night, and the last couples in love were saying goodbye on the benches near the historic market. He sat exactly in the center of the square, facing the colonial fountain, dressed in jeans and a simple white shirt, a far cry from the image of the millionaire businessman the world knew. An hour passed. Then, too, Richard didn't move from his spot, observing every shadow that approached, waiting to see that familiar silhouette he knew by heart. His phone vibrated several times with calls from the office, but he ignored them all. Tonight, the only thing that mattered was Sarah. At 3 in the morning, when only a few night workers and a couple of street musicians were packing up their instruments, Richard saw a figure slowly approaching from the main street. His heart stopped when he recognized that walk, that way she tilted her head when she was nervous. Sarah appeared under the light of a street lamp, carrying a sleeping David in her arms. She wore a simple floral dress Richard hadn't seen before, and her hair fell loose over her shoulders. She had been crying. Her green eyes were swollen and red. They stopped a few feet away, looking at each other in silence. The weight of everything they had lived, everything they had said and unsaid, floated between them like an invisible barrier. "You came," was the first thing she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I told you I'd be waiting." Richard slowly stood up. "And here I am. It's been 5 hours, Richard. It's 3 in the morning. I would have waited until dawn. I would have waited a whole week if necessary." Sarah took one more step closer, and Richard could see the fresh tears on her cheeks. "Why are you making it so hard?" she asked him painfully. "Why can't you just let me go?" "Because I love you." Richard also stepped closer. "Because I love David as if he were my own son. Because with you, I discovered that true love exists, and I can't pretend it didn't change my entire life." "My mom told you about the debts, didn't she?" Richard nodded. "Yes, she told me, and it hurt to know you were suffering alone, that you didn't trust me to share that burden. Don't you understand?" Sarah raised her voice, and David stirred restlessly in her arms. "That's exactly why I can't be with you. I don't want to be the poor woman who needs to be rescued by the rich man. I don't want you to love me out of pity." "Pity?" Richard laughed bitterly. "Sarah, you saved me. I was the one who was lost, the one who had forgotten how to feel, how to live. You gave me back the ability to love." David woke up, and seeing Richard, immediately extended his little arms towards him with a smile. Sarah hesitated for a moment, but finally handed him over. The baby snuggled against Richard's chest, as if he had been waiting for that moment all his life. "He missed you too," Sarah admitted, watching David play with the buttons on Richard's shirt. "Every night he looked towards the door, as if he expected you to appear. I missed you both every day, every hour, every minute." They sat together on the bench, with David content between them. The silence of the early morning enveloped them like a blanket, and for a moment it seemed nothing had changed between them. "Richard, there's something you need to know." Sarah finally broke the silence. "Mark proposed to me." Richard felt the blow, but forced himself to remain calm. "I know. Your mother told me. What did you say to him?" "I said yes." The words fell like stones between them. Richard felt as if his heart had been ripped from his chest, but he managed to keep his voice steady. "Do you love him?" Sarah took so long to answer that Richard knew the truth before she spoke. "Not like I love you," she finally whispered. "But Mark is good. He's stable. He's safe. David would grow up in a peaceful environment, without paparazzi, without complications. And what about you? Would you be happy?" "Happiness is a luxury single mothers can't always afford." Sarah looked at him with tears. "Sometimes you have to choose security." Richard remained silent for a long moment, stroking David's head, who had fallen back asleep. "Do you know what Emily, my fiancée who died, wrote to me in the last letter she left me?" Sarah shook her head. "She wrote, 'Richard, if something's to me, promise me you won't let fear prevent you from loving again. Promise me that when you find the right person, you'll fight for that love, no matter the obstacles. True love is too rare to let it slip away out of cowardice.'" Richard's voice broke slightly. "It took me 5 years to understand what she meant, and I understood it the day I met you." Sarah sobbed openly now. "But what if it doesn't work? What if your world ends up destroying us? What if, after all, we're not compatible? And what if it does work?" Richard took her free hand. "What if we are exactly what we need for each other? What if David grows up in a family full of true love? What if together we can build something beautiful?" Richard got off the bench and knelt in front of her, still holding David. "Sarah Miller, I don't have a ring. I don't have a prepared speech. I have nothing but my heart broken from being without you this past month. But I promise you that if you give me a chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that our love is worth more than any obstacle. Richard, marry me. Not because you need financial security, but because you love me. Marry me, because together we are better people than we are apart. Marry me because David deserves a family where true love reigns." Sarah closed her eyes, fighting between reason and heart. What if the media destroys us? What if your world changes us? Then we change the world. Richard stood up and sat beside her. Again. "Sarah, I built an empire from scratch. If I can do that, I can protect my family from anything." "Your family. You and David. You are my family, the only one I want to have." At that moment, David woke up and looked at his two adoptive parents with those big, innocent eyes. He babbled something that sounded like "da-da" as he looked at Richard, and then something that sounded like "mama" as he looked at Sarah. They looked at each other, and in that instant, both knew what the correct answer was. "Yes," Sarah whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Richard kissed her with all the pent-up passion of those weeks of separation, while David clapped between them as if he perfectly understood what was happening. 6 months later, the small chapel in St. Augustine, Florida, was filled with sunflowers and hydrangeas. Sarah walked down the aisle dressed in a simple white lace gown, carrying David in her arms, who wore a tiny tuxedo that made him look like a miniature prince. Richard waited for her at the end of the aisle, handsomer than ever, with tears of happiness in his blue eyes. Mary Ann cried in the front row, along with Mrs. Peterson and some of Richard's employees, who had become adopted family. The ceremony was simple, but full of love. When the minister asked if they accepted to love each other in good times and bad, in richness and poverty, both answered, "I do," with a conviction that was felt even in the last row. "By the power vested in me by the state of Florida, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride," said Pastor John with a paternal smile. The kiss was soft, tender, full of future promises. David, who had been quiet throughout the ceremony, chose that moment to cheer with joy, making everyone present laugh. After the ceremony, there was a small party in Mary Ann's backyard. Richard had insisted it be intimate, family-oriented, away from the spotlights and cameras. They danced to classic American tunes under the stars, ate barbecue, prepared by Sarah's grandmother's expert hands, and toasted with Shak's sweet tea. During the party, Richard took the microphone to give a speech. "A year ago, I was a lost man who believed that work and money were enough to fill an empty heart. Today, thanks to this extraordinary woman and this child whom I already consider my son, I discovered that true wealth is in love, in family, in the small moments that make life worthwhile." He turned to Sarah, who looked at him with sparkling eyes. "Sarah, you promised to give me a chance to prove to you that our love could overcome any obstacle. Now I promise that I will spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy, protecting our family, and building with you a life full of love and purpose." Applause filled the backyard, but for Sarah, only her husband's voice and the promise of a bright future existed. 2 years later, the Harris Miller family lived in a beautiful house in Key West, Florida, a perfect midpoint between the tranquility Sarah needed and Richard's business responsibilities. The house had spacious gardens where David, now almost 3, ran happily yelling, "Papa Richard," every time he heard the car arrive. Richard had completely reorganized his company, delegating many responsibilities and working mostly from home. He had discovered that family happiness made him more creative and efficient in his business. Sarah had resumed her literature studies and worked part-time as an editor at a small local publishing house, finally fulfilling her dream of working with books and writers. In the afternoons, she wrote her own stories, inspired by her own experience of love and rebirth. One April afternoon, While David was taking his nap and Richard worked in his home office, Sarah approached him with a mysterious smile. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, sitting on his lap. "For you, I have a lifetime." Richard closed his laptop and hugged her. "What's wrong? Do you remember what you said the day we got married, about building a family full of love?" "Of course, why?" Sarah took his hands and placed them on her belly. "Because our family is going to grow." Richard looked at her, confused for a moment, until realization struck him like lightning. "Are you pregnant?" Sarah nodded with tears of happiness. 2 months along. Richard was speechless for a moment, then lifted her into his arms and spun her around as they both laughed and cried at the same time. "Really? We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby," Sarah kissed him. "David's going to be a big brother." That night, as they had dinner as a family, they told David that he would soon have a little brother or sister. The child, who already naturally called Richard Dad, clapped excitedly even though he didn't fully understand what it meant. "Baby?" David asked, pointing to Sarah's belly. "Yes, my love, a baby." Sarah stroked his hair. "You're going to be the most incredible big brother in the world." David leaned in close to his mother's belly and gave it a kiss. "Hello, baby," he whispered, making Richard and Sarah melt with tenderness. 6 months later, Emily Sarah Harris Miller came into the world on a sunny day in Key West. She was a perfect baby, with Richard's blue eyes and Sarah's brown hair. David welcomed her with the excitement of a protective older brother, insisting on carrying her with supervision and singing songs he made up himself. Richard, holding his daughter for the first time, felt an indescribable emotion. Not only was she the first biological child he would have, but she represented the culmination of a love that had healed broken hearts and created a beautiful family from the ashes of loss. "She looks like Emily," he whispered to Sarah, referring to his first fiancée, "as if she had something to do with bringing her to us." "Maybe she did," Sarah smiled, understanding perfectly. "Maybe she wanted to make sure you found love again." On little Emily's first birthday, the Harris Miller family hosted a big party in their backyard. Mary Ann, Mrs. Peterson, who had traveled especially from Miami, some of Richard's employees who had become close family, and several friends they had made in Key West were there. As she watched David teach his little sister to walk and Richard hold Emily while conducting a business conversation on the phone with absolute naturalness, Sarah realized that she had found something she thought was lost forever, a true home. That night, after putting the children to bed, Richard and Sarah sat on their terrace overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, holding hands and watching the stars. "Did you ever imagine our story would end like this?" Sarah asked, snuggling against Richard's chest. "Honestly, when I met you, I couldn't imagine a tomorrow without pain." Richard stroked her hair. "Now I can't imagine a tomorrow without you, without our children, without this beautiful life we built together. Sometimes I think about all the things that had to happen for us to meet," Sarah mused. "Robert had to die for me to be alone. Emily had to die for you to be emotionally available. I had to lose my apartment to end up working at the bookstore. You had to have that presentation specifically that day. Do you think it was destiny?" "I think it was love." Sarah lifted her head to look at him. "I think true love is so powerful that it finds a way to unite people who are meant to be together, no matter how many obstacles it has to overcome along the way." Richard kissed her gently, feeling the same electricity he had felt that first time in the bookstore, multiplied by years of shared love, challenges overcome together, and a family built with dedication and tenderness. "I love you, Sarah Harris," he whispered against her lips. "I love you, Richard Harris," she replied. "Thank you for teaching me that broken hearts can not only heal, but become something even more beautiful than they were before." At dawn the next day, as the sun painted the Florida Keys golden once more, the Harris Miller family awoke to another day of their extraordinary life, a life that had begun with pain and solitude, but had transformed into a symphony of love, laughter, shared challenges, and multiplied joys. Their story was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. It was worked on day by day with love and dedication, and it was living proof that sometimes, when you least expect it, life gives you exactly what you need to be happy. 5 years had passed since that first night in the Miami bookstore where Richard waited until dawn for an answer. Now, David was 8 years old and Emily 5, and the Harris Miller family had become a local legend in Key West. Richard had completely transformed his company. It was no longer just a hospitality technology business. He had created a foundation that helped single mothers across the US start small businesses. The idea had come after seeing Sarah's struggles, and now it employed hundreds of people who worked from home, allowing them to care for their families while earning a decent income. "Dad, why do you always help single mums?" David had asked him one afternoon while watching Richard review foundation applications. "Because your mum taught me that single mothers are the bravest women in the world, son, and they all deserve a chance to build a better life for their families." Sarah had published her first book, Letters to My Broken Heart, a collection of stories based on her experience of loss and rebirth. The book had become a bestseller in the US, and she received letters from women across the country who identified with her stories. One Sunday morning, while having breakfast in their backyard, Emily ran towards them with a hibiscus flower in her hand. "Mummy, look! The flower is the same color as my eyes," the girl shouted, excited. "You're right, my love." Sarah picked her up. "You have the most beautiful eyes in the world, just like your dad." "And I have eyes like who?" David asked, always competitive with his younger sister. "You have eyes like mine." Sarah ruffled his hair. "But your smile is just like your daddy Robert's." David smiled proudly. Richard and Sarah had decided from the beginning that David would know the story of his biological father, honoring his memory while building their new family. "Is Daddy Robert in heaven watching us grow?" Emily asked with the innocent curiosity of a 5-year-old. "I'm sure he is, Princess." Sarah exchanged a knowing look with Richard. "And I'm sure he's very proud of the beautiful family we have." Richard came up behind Sarah and hugged her while she held Emily. "You know what I think," he said. "I think Robert and Emily, my first fiancé, helped us find each other. I think from where they are, they wanted to make sure we weren't alone." That afternoon, while the children played in the backyard with Max, the golden retriever they had adopted the previous year, Richard and Sarah received a call that would change their lives once again. "Mrs. Harris, this is the director of the St. Mary's Orphanage in San Diego, California. We have a special situation and we thought you might be interested." Sarah put it on speaker so Richard could hear. "Tell us, Director." "We have a 3-month-old baby who was abandoned at our doors last week. We know about your foundation and your family. The baby has a special condition. She was born with a cleft lip, and the families who have seen her have not wanted to adopt her due to the medical expenses involved." Richard and Sarah looked at each other, and both immediately knew what their answer would be. "When can we meet her?" Richard asked without hesitation. "Are you really interested? I must warn you that it will require several surgeries and—" "Director," Sarah interrupted her firmly, "children don't choose to be born with special conditions, but they can choose to grow up in families that love them unconditionally. When can we go?" 2 days later, Richard, Sarah, David, and Emily traveled to San Diego. When they saw little Hope for the first time, with her big brown eyes and her imperfect but beautiful smile, they knew she had come to complete their family. "She's pretty," Emily said, gently stroking the baby's tiny hand. "Can she be my little sister?" "If you want," David also approached. "I can teach her to walk when she grows up." The adoption process took 6 months, during which they visited Hope every week. Richard took charge of finding the best pediatric plastic surgeons, while Sarah researched everything about caring for children with cleft lip. The day they finally brought Hope home, they held a small ceremony in their backyard. Mary Ann, who now lived with them permanently to help with the children, held the baby while David and Emily officially welcomed her to the Harris Miller family. "Hope," Sarah said, taking the baby in her arms, "you've come to a family that will love you exactly as you are. that will celebrate every one of your smiles, and that will be with you every step of your growth." Richard approached and kissed the little girl's forehead. "Welcome home, Princess. You have two siblings who are dying to teach you everything about life, a grandma who will spoil you rotten, and two parents who would give anything to see you happy." That night, as they put the three children to bed, David asked a question that took them by surprise. "Papa Richard, are we a normal family?" Richard sat on the bed next to him. "What do you think, champ?" "Well, Emily has blue eyes and I have green eyes. Hope has a different lip. You're not my blood, Dad, but you love me like you are. Mommy was married before you. So, what do you think?" David smiled with that wisdom children sometimes have. "I think we're not normal. We're special. We're a family that chose each other, not just born that way." Richard felt his eyes well up with tears. "You're very smart, David. You're right. We're a family that chose each other with love." 2 years later, when Hope turned 3, she had already undergone 2 successful surgeries, and her smile was the most radiant of all. She had learned to walk holding David's hand, had learned to say "mommy" imitating Emily, and had stolen the heart of everyone she met. Richard had sold a large portion of his shares in the company to concentrate completely on the foundation and his family. Forbes magazine had interviewed him about his early retirement from the corporate world. "It's not a retirement," Richard had explained during the interview. "It's a promotion. I went from being the CEO of a company to being the dad of 3 incredible children. There's no more important position in the world." Sarah had started giving lectures on motherhood, loss, and emotional rebirth. Her second book, The Love That Heals, was being translated into several languages. One afternoon, as she finished writing in her home office, Richard entered with a mysterious expression. "Can you come to the backyard for a moment?" he asked. "What's wrong? Are the kids okay?" "The kids are perfect. Just come with me." Sarah followed him to the backyard, where she found something that left her speechless. Richard had built a small outdoor library with shelves full of books, comfortable chairs, and a sign that read, "Sarah's Dream Nook." "Richard, when did you do this?" "The last 3 weeks, while you were working in the mornings," he smiled. "I wanted you to have a special place to write. A place where you could watch our children grow while you create stories that will inspire other women." Sarah approached the shelves and discovered they were filled not only with books, but with letters, hundreds of letters. "What are these?" "Letters from women all over the US who have read your books." Richard picked one at random. "This one is from a woman in Oregon who says your story helped her leave an abusive relationship. This other one is from a single mother in Maine who started her own business after reading about our foundation." Sarah read some letters with tears in her eyes. Each one told a story of overcoming, of women who had found strength in her words to change their lives. "Do you realize the impact you've had?" Richard hugged her from behind. "When I met you, you thought you didn't deserve to be seen. Now thousands of women see you as their inspiration." That night, during family dinner, David made an important announcement. "Family, I have something to tell you." Everyone turned to him with attention. "At school, they asked us to write about our favorite hero." David cleared his throat dramatically. "I wrote about us." "About us?" Emily asked, confused. "Yes. I wrote that my heroes are my parents because they took their broken hearts and turned them into a beautiful family. I wrote that my mom is brave because she kept going when everything seemed impossible, and that my dad is brave because he chose to love when he was afraid of losing someone again." Richard and Sarah looked at each other with emotion as David continued. "And I wrote that Emily is brave because she always shares everything she has, and that Hope is brave because she smiles even though she's different, and that Grandma Mary Ann is brave because she takes care of us all with so much love." The table was silent for a moment, until Hope clapped and shouted, "Brave family!" Everyone laughed and stood up to hug David, who had managed to capture in simple words the essence of what they had built together. 10 years after that first night in the Miami bookstore, Richard and Sarah renewed their wedding vows in an outdoor ceremony in their Pushy Key West backyard. David, now 18 and about to study medicine to help children like Hope, officiated the ceremony. Emily, 15 and already showing a talent for writing like her mother, read a poem she had written about true love. Hope, 13 and completely recovered from her surgeries, sang a song she had composed for her parents. 10 years ago, Richard said during his new vows, I thought I was saving a single mother and her baby. Now I realize that you saved me. You saved me from an empty life, from a closed heart, from the belief that I was destined to be alone. 10 years ago, Sarah responded, I thought my love story had ended forever. Now I know it was just beginning. Thank you for teaching me that the heart can be reborn, that love can multiply infinitely, and that the most beautiful families are those built with choice, dedication, and unconditional love. As they danced their first song as a renewed marriage, under the paper lights hanging from the trees in their backyard, surrounded by their 3 children, Mary Ann, Mrs. Peterson, who had traveled specially from Miami, and dozens of friends who had become chosen family, Richard and Sarah knew they had achieved something extraordinary. They had not only healed their own broken hearts, they had created a legacy of love that extended far beyond their immediate family. The foundation had helped over 1,000 women start new lives. Sarah's books had inspired thousands more. Their children were growing up with the certainty that love can overcome any obstacle. That night, after everyone had left and the children were asleep, Richard and Sarah sat on their favorite terrace in the same spot, where they had had so many important conversations over the years. Did you ever imagine our story would end like this? Sarah asked, snuggling against Richard's chest. Honestly, when I met you, I couldn't imagine a tomorrow without pain. Richard stroked her hair. Now I can't imagine a tomorrow without you, without our children, without this beautiful life we built together. Sometimes I think about all the things that had to happen for us to meet, Sarah reflected. Robert had to die for me, to be alone. Emily had to die for you to be emotionally available. I had to lose my apartment to end up working at the bookstore. You had to have that presentation specifically that day. Do you think it was destiny? I think it was love. Sarah lifted her head to look at him. I think true love is so powerful that it finds a way to unite people who are meant to be together, no matter how many obstacles it has to overcome along the way. Richard kissed her gently, feeling the same. Electricity he had felt that first time in the bookstore, multiplied by years of shared love, challenges overcome together, and a family built with dedication and tenderness. I love you, Sarah Harris, he whispered against her lips. I love you, Richard Harris, she replied. Thank you for teaching me that broken hearts can not only heal, but become something even more beautiful than they were before. At dawn the next day, as the sun painted the Florida Keys golden once more, the Harris Miller family awoke to another day of their extraordinary life, a life that had begun with pain and solitude, but had transformed into a symphony of love, laughter, shared challenges, and multiplied joys. Their story was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was real. It was worked on day by day with love and dedication, and it was living proof that sometimes, when you least expect it, life gives you exactly what you need to be happy. This story isn't just about them. It can also be about you. Have you ever felt your heart could be reborn? Do you believe in love that can heal everything? Subscribe to the channel. Comment what you thought of this story. Tell us which city you're watching from, and suggest new ideas for future stories you'd like to hear.